Earth is home to many creatures. Some may even consider a few of them monsters. But what of those more elusive and hidden creatures? The ones we just can't seem to find. Welcome to Monday Morning Monsters. Cryptozoologist and paranormal researcher Barnaby Jones talks about the unknown, mythical, undiscovered, and unidentified creatures from around the world, and the people who have seen them, look for them, and research them. Hear from witnesses about their encounters, as well as renowned names in the field about their work and research. Barnaby is the founder and lead investigator for Cryptids, Anomalies, and the Paranormal Society based in Wisconsin. CAPS travels across Wisconsin and beyond looking for connections between different phenomena and how they can all be connected. Now, your host of Monday Morning Monsters, Barnaby Jones.
Good morning, monsters. It is another episode here today, and we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We usually talk about like a lot of North American stuff and Bigfoot and other cryptids, but we have a special guest that should be bringing us around the world with her research and from her show. But first off, I want to give you a little heads up on some of the stuff that we got coming up with CAPS. So as you all know, we have our show, Monday Morning Monsters. That's what you're watching. We have our show On the Trail of Undiscovered Beasts streaming on Paraflix right now. The last episode just came out this week. And if you guys haven't checked it out, go ahead and subscribe to Paraflix. It is a all paranormal streaming service, and it's about $3.99 a month, and you can get 10% off your first 3 months with the promo code CAPS10. If you go to the website, wisconsincaps.com, there's a link right there, and you can subscribe off of that. And up next, our first live event of this year, we are going to be at the Frogman Festival. That is coming up in March, and is the first ever convention for the Frogman. So this is the first time that this will be held. And I see in the comments section over here already today, the Adventure Guide says that he just released an in-depth video on the Loveland Frogman, with all 8 encounters, names, coordinates, and details. And he'll be back today. So maybe he's in the audience right now. I don't know. But so go check that out. Maybe see some more information on the Frogman. And I also do have Jeff Craig from the Map in Black, who is the official showrunner of this conference. And he'll be on in a couple weeks talking about the Frogman and some other stuff that he has coming up with around the world, cryptids and stuff. Then after that, at the end of March, we will be in South Carolina at the Haunting at the Hagood Mill. And that'll be a really cool one. Katie Stafford and Jeremy Leonard and a bunch of other people will be there, along with myself and Mary Barrett, psychic medium and hypnotist. So that one will be a very fun event that is sponsored by Raven Paranormal. And in May, we have the Ohio Bigfoot Conference. This is at Salt Fork State Park. It is one of the biggest Bigfoot conventions, and it also has a Bigfoot. It's in one of the very hot spots of Bigfoot activity for Ohio. So if you can get that, I think tickets are all sold out for that event. But if you have a ticket for that event, we'll be there. And then, of course, we are going to be at our own event, the Marinette Menominee Bigfoot and Paranormal Convention. We have one more speaker that's going to be announced for this event. We have Angela Zabel is going to be doing a psychic medium gallery at 7 o'clock on Saturday. And the speakers will be Chad Lewis, the CAPS team, Christopher Noel, Angela Zabel, and one more that we'll be announcing shortly. We just got to wait for a last-minute confirmation on some stuff from that. Friday night, we will have a VIP dinner. And if you want to come have dinner with all the speakers and get some personal time with them to talk and ask them your questions, that's how you do it. And you can get VIP tickets for this event that will get you into the dinner and the medium gallery, and then the event itself with the speakers and the vendors You have to purchase them, I believe, before May because of the dinner. We have to have a final reservation count for that. So that's what we got coming up. All right, guys. So my guest today is the host of Myth Monsters podcast. And yeah, so she does all kinds of cryptids and mythological creatures, and I will let her tell you all about it. Erin, welcome to the show.
Hello. How are you?
You were typing. I was waiting.
No, I was just posting the Twitch link about
Awesome.
and being like, oh my god, I'm doing a live show. Please come watch.
Absolutely. That's what I do during the opening credits of every show. I'm like, share. Welcome to the show. Tell us about yourself. Tell us how you got into all this and about your podcast.
Yeah, so I'm Erin. I'm very obviously from the UK. I run Myth Monsters podcast, which is I'd advertise it as a bite-sized 15 minutes podcast every week that just covers a different monster or cryptid from anywhere in the world. I try and cover as many as I possibly can. But yeah, I've been doing that since 2021 now, which feels really weird. It feels like it wasn't 2 years ago, but it is, which is wild. And yeah, so started it just after lockdown, and I was looking for something creative to do, and have always been into myths and legends, grew up reading Greek mythology, so was very much the next kind of thing, I suppose. And for me, I spotted a niche kind of really in the sense that I didn't want to listen to a 2-hour long podcast on a monster. It was just like, no one commutes for that long. So it was very much like, I want to find something that I would want to listen to as well. So that's how I got into it, really. And yeah, going strong nearly 2 years now. So very exciting, and get to do amazing little guest segments like this.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad that you got on the show. I know it's like really hard with like the live and stuff, and being across the pond, as you say. It's hard to figure out time. And you said it was about 6:00 p.m. over there for you.
Yes, yeah, it's
Awesome.
6:10, in fact.
6:10. Ooh, it's getting later.
And it's still dark here, obviously. So it's like permanently 3:00. It starts to get dark. So I feel that living in the dark in January is just a normal thing.
That's terrible. It was getting darker and darker over here, and now it finally is pushed back past 5:00.
Oh,
so I get sunlight a little bit past 5:00 now. So.
I used to come back and forth. I used to work for a Danish company, and I'd go out there in like November to Copenhagen, and it would be dark at like 2:30, and we'd all be sat in the office, and I'd be like, is it time to go home? And they're like, no, it's lunch.
Yeah, it makes for a very long night after it gets dark out, especially if you can see outside.
And obviously it's like freezing cold there as well, so you'd go out and it would be like -5, and you'd just be like, this is a nightmare.
Wow, absolutely. How cold is it over there for you? Well, where are you exactly?
I'm in Essex, which is it's the county just southeast of London, so I'm about an hour out. But it's gosh, I don't even know. I think it's like 9 degrees, something like that. So it's not crazy right now, but it's chilly. It's light jacket weather. Light jacket and a hoodie, maybe a gilet if I'm feeling it.
30 degrees Fahrenheit is shorts weather for us here in Wisconsin. So.
Oh my god. No, thank you. Yeah. No, we're very conservative when it comes to the coats. Most English people wear a coat until like solid May going on June sometimes. We just don't. Our weather is all over the place. Like, I mean, the heat waves last year, I know the entirety of America was laughing at us, but we just don't have AC. We just don't have it. So it's a full-blown nightmare when it's really hot. People really do die. It's really quite bad. I'm laughing because it's bad.
Yeah. That's all right. We're good here. So I love your podcast.
Thank you.
I stumbled upon it. You're welcome. I stumbled upon it every once in a while. Like we go out in the field and we do research and we look for cryptids and stuff over here. And I think I think I found yours. I was looking for the Goat Man or the Poplick Monster.
Yes.
And I think that was the first one that I stumbled upon on yours, because there wasn't too many just specific podcasts on that. And I really liked the format and everything. So then I started at the beginning, and I think I'm up to June or July of last year. So
Oh gosh.
yeah,
You've got
so
a while to go.
I do. I was hoping to finish them all by the time I got to you, but I did not. I had to move to a different area at work, and I haven't been able to listen to as many podcasts. But
Hey, I get it. It's fine.
yeah,
I'll forgive you.
thank you. I'll get through them. Don't worry. So that's where I'm at. So forgive me if I'm not all caught up on what you've covered, but I absolutely love the format of it. Like you talk about, the cryptids, give a description and everything, and then the etymology of the words, of how they got their names, and the modern references to these things where you can see them and stuff. And it's really a unique format for the show. Like you said, there's nothing that I found like it in that. And it gives you just enough information about the cryptids that gives you this diving board from it. And even somebody like me that has done a lot of research in specific ones, there was even some interesting stuff that I hadn't heard. I obviously for Yep.
Yes.
Which I accredit this to the fact that I'm over in the US and you're over in London and Europe area, and you have access to different materials and stuff than we do. So you're researching totally different things. For example, I want to bring this up. The episode on the chupacabra.
Yes.
Now that is my favorite cryptid. If anybody's listening to the show, you know that. And I mean, I've delved deep into the chupacabra. And I'm listening to your episode going, all right, cool. You'll tell me, video games and stuff like that, and and art. And there was actually some information in there that I hadn't heard, of different sightings and different locations and stuff that that I had never actually heard of. So can you tell me, like, when you're doing research in that, where do you go for your research?
You know what? It sounds really bad. I'm not going to say Wikipedia, just as a highlight here. So I'm very much like I'll pull up like 20,000 tabs out of Google and just go through, even if they look like, the Wix websites or whatever. It's very much like I'm just going to pull everything up and see what I can find. I think with the chupacabra and like ones that are that big, like, I mean, Mothman is my favorite cryptid, but it's ridiculous. I want to give it beans really bad. And just the idea that I can find so much content through just like Reddit is a great resource. And just finding people talking about stuff like that. It's just finding everything. I'm finding these little forum posts, and I'm very lucky as well. I have a lot of friends abroad. Like, one of my best friends lives in the Philippines, and I cover the Philippines a lot, like a lot of monsters there. And I thankfully have some real world class. She's a fantastic resource, as she's so into that as well. And I've got a lot of American friends who are exactly the same. Will be like, I'm very invested in the Bigfoot hunt and stuff like that. So it's, from this perspective on the other side, it's really interesting. But I guess with like the English side, we're very, in terms of historically interested. A lot of people here are, I do feel like we are quite historically interesting here, I suppose, in the sense that a lot of people are interested in our history, be it in the country or without it. And a lot of the time you can bring up something like Jack Frost, for example. I did an episode on over the holidays. And it's like those little bits that people know, those little tidbits, I end up putting them all together and being able to throw something together that's 15 minutes long. So it's very much a combination of going through some really random websites and word of mouth, if I'm honest, and seeing what people know and what stories they have to give around it. Like, for example, like Jack Frost, I know nothing about Nat King Cole, and that might sound really bad. I did not know the Jack Frost nipping at your nose little song, the chestnuts roasting on an open fire. I do now, thanks to that one TikTok guy, and anyone who's seen it will know. But and that's it. It's stuff like that where I'm like, that will fit really well, and I can talk about that for a minute. It's stuff like that that really interests me. And whilst Wikipedia is a great resource for other resources, so is just throwing yourself into Google searching and looking through websites that you might not think get you anywhere, that actually have a lot of like personalized information that is really handy. So Popelic, for example, I found this amazing. I don't think they run it anymore, but it's a like a community in, oh my god, in Kentucky that run this website where they basically talk about the Popelic monster all the time. And I found that and was like, how have I managed to find this like amazing resource? It talked about all of the people who are affected and like what they're trying to do to stop people going onto that horrendous trellis. It's stuff like that that I'm like, how have I managed to find this through just Googling for like 20 minutes?
The internet is a very large, scary place when you get on it.
It really is.
So speaking of the research and stuff like that, I also was very impressed that when you are giving your book recommendations on the podcast, that one of my friends and co-researchers right here in Wisconsin, Chad Lewis, appeared on your Wendigo episode.
Oh, amazing.
As your book recommendation. I'm like, Chad, I know that book. I have that book.
That's one of my favorite things.
Yeah. There's a couple, and Cryptozoology A to Z by Lauren Coleman.
Yes, I'm reading that literally at the moment.
That was my first cryptozoology book.
Oh, amazing.
I actually got Lauren Coleman to sign it at one of the conventions this year, or a couple years ago.
So cool. I love that. I think my first one, I'm trying to think, is like it was like a picture book. It's by DK, the big publisher, and it's like a big like picture book. It's like the Mythical Encyclopedia, something like that. It's a professor. I can't remember her name. And it was like the most. I'm really drawn to art. Like I'm very much I'm covered in tattoos and all of this stuff. I'm very, if I can consume it in some way, I'll have it. And for me, picture books are just amazing, especially when it comes to like cryptids and mythical monsters. The imagination that goes into them in their creation, let alone like someone drawing them up, is just phenomenal. So I'll sit there with a Myth Monsters picture book like nobody's. You can't see it because I've blurred it, but there's like it's a map of cryptids behind me, and it's got different cryptids all on there. So I'm all over that kind of stuff.
In the opening segment, did you hear the map in black? It is it's a full United States map. Folds out. I actually have it behind me on the. I can't reach it. But it's a fold out map, and it's made by Jeff Craig, the guy that's doing the Frogman convention, and he has every like cryptid by states and different haunted locations where different important sites. Something for you to look into if you're interested.
100%. I love I don't really cover ghosts very often, but I really love reading like supernatural stuff like that is all I'm about. And like, thankfully I have the means to go about this country and visit some haunted castles and stuff like that. And it's very like Tower of London, and the fact that it might be haunted by Anne Boleyn is just it's genius. And every time I go past it, because you can get a bus straight past Tower Hill and look into the windows of the castle, every time I go through and go over Tower Bridge, I'm like, I want it to pop up in a window really bad, but I also don't, because I know it would scare the living daylights out of me, but I really do.
Awesome. So the reason I asked you on the show is, as I said, I have a lot of guests over here in the U.S. and I know all the researchers over here. So I asked you to come on and talk a little bit about some of the creatures from overseas, Asia and Europe and China, and some of the stuff over there. So what can you tell us?
Oh gosh,
what have you got for me?
I think, to be honest, I think it's there's a real thing here in the sense of we have a lot of mythical beasts because our history is so long, and especially like I'm talking Europe here, and of course it definitely counts for Asia as well. It's so intense that it goes back to, I mean, of course the US does, but it goes into native territory, and then it's very much, stuff like the Wendigo and stuff like that is very much sometimes hidden behind these kind of native rules of not speaking to outsiders, which is completely fair. But we don't have that in any shape or form over here. Everyone loves to talk about their haunted rabbit, and it's very much it's very much like a throw together. And what I find, especially when researching European and Asian stuff, is that it's quite difficult to differentiate between what would be a cryptid and what would kind of be a myth monster, depending on how far they're going back. So, of course, with ours, it's very much a case of figuring out when we can kind of classify a cryptid to be a cryptid, like how new does it need to be in order for it not to be a mythical beast. And I think because of our historical backgrounds throughout Europe, it's quite, I think a lot of people will hold on to that idea that something like the basilisk, for example, would be held up. We could totally read that as a cryptid. Could 100%. Cockatrice, exactly the same. But it's like, it kind of goes back enough where we could go, well, it's medieval, so would it be a cryptid or would it be a mythical beast? But is there any link to like a hero story or something like that? That's where I think people are kind of, especially with the links to the Greeks and the Romans over here, is I think people a lot go for that kind of feel if they're linked to those kind of mythologies, like these really cool mythologies that people stand by. If they're any way linked to them, they're like, oh, it's myth. It's myth. We don't even need to consider what a cryptid is. And I'll be honest, before I started properly looking into this, I had no knowledge of what a cryptid really was. I knew about Slender Man, because he haunted my dreams as a teenager. I'm a 90s kid. I grew up with the internet, and that was not, it was not good. But I think that really, and the American side of it, was something that was pushing the cryptid thing, especially with something like Bigfoot. Like, is it a mythical beast? Is it a cryptid? It's most definitely a cryptid. It just doesn't go back far enough for us to justify that it's a myth. Same with something like the Yeti. Is something that's just something that you can kind of put either label on. And I think with us here, it's very much like, oh, all of our history is really old, so it's a myth. And that's the easiest way to par it off. But generally, I really like the European ones. Something like the Wolpertinger is he's my absolute favorite on this side, which is kind of like a jackalope on your side. It's pretty much, actually thinking about it, it's pretty much the same thing. It's just the European, it's the German version of the jackalope, with the bunny with the stag horns coming out. I just realized I look like that guy from Stranger Things, so I'm so sorry. We don't want to bring that back. But yeah, I mean, something like that where we can't really figure out where it comes from, and we know it's not very old, I think is the only kind of thing we can kind of put the cryptid label on.
Absolutely. I think when you're looking at myth versus cryptid, excuse me, cryptid, what I deal with is more things that could still be around today, or that are just undiscovered. You know, and when we're talking about things like dragons or your other mythological creatures, the cockatrice, the basilisk, and stuff like that, you have to look at it from the standpoint of, does it have like a biological niche where it fits in? Does it actually exist? Does it have a place in the world where they could be a breeding population, where they could, have these things? And, like the cockatrice, for example, I love that. I'll tell you a little anecdote here. The cockatrice, I kind of learned about that originally from My Little Pony. And
Amazing.
I love how My Little Pony finds its way into your show all the time as how many different creatures, like, oh, this thing was in My Little Pony. This thing was in My Little Pony.
I know. And also how many versions of My Little Pony there are. I'm always like, oh, I know my friend, like Friendship is Magic is the one like that hit it off and was really good. And then it's like, oh, My Little Pony and Friends. And I'm like, I'm sorry, which one is this? How? I get the unicorn reference. Everything else I don't understand.
There's a lot of things in that show, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, the cockatrice, and I do have a show. I'm all off topic. There's so much here to discuss, and I have a book series that you have never brought up, and it is Encrypted by Sean and McGuire.
I haven't read them, I must say.
Okay, there's
would definitely.
Encrypted and the October Day series.
Okay. By the same author.
By Sean and McGuire, yes. And Encrypted, she writes about this family of cryptozoologists, and they run into all these things. There's a whole family of gorgons. They chase around a cockatrice, and there's all these different things. Werewolves, chupacabras, Bigfoot are all in the series as well. And I absolutely love that series. And I've never heard it. I know certain creatures are on there, and I listen on those episodes. I'm like, oh, you missed it. But it's definitely something you should look into.
Yeah.
And the October Day series is all Fae mythology.
Oh,
the main character is a changeling. So she's I can't think of it. She's a blood magic fairy. So she works with that, and she deals with the Kaith she deals with the I thought of it earlier. Now I can't think of it. The Nine Tails foxes.
Kitsune. That's it.
Yep.
I've been doing my this year's stuff, and I was like, Kinara. Kinara is the only one I can think of. It's the only one I can think of. Yes. That sounds amazing. You'll have to send me the names and stuff after this. That would be fabulous.
Definitely. I'm always
on the lookout.
I would love to have her on the show and discuss that too, because she's obviously must have done a lot of research to write these, because these are just like storybooks. They're not fictional or fictional. They're fictional stories, not nonfiction. I always get those.
I love that.
But, yeah,
I found as well recently that I got the Percy Jackson by Rick Rodane, not entirely sure.
Yeah.
But I got his series for, I think I got it like around summertime, started reading those, and I was like, I've seen the crap films, don't get me wrong, but I was like, oh, I didn't actually realize how much mythology is actually within these, and how many different cultures and different monsters come into this. Actually, I'm quite surprised. And I actually very recently watched the second movie, and they've got Scylla and Charybdis, and I was like, this is something you just never see. I want to see a whirlpool with teeth. Why isn't this mentioned enough? Like, I want that whole rock and a hard place thing. But I would just love, and as much as I love the very classic Jason the Argonauts, I would really love like a real proper recent day Jason the Argonauts, and not like the Clash of the Titans remake, which was just dogma, but like a proper one where it's like really good. And actually, if they remade Clash of the Titans again and just made it better, I would be so happy. But I was so lucky, and they had I can't remember his name for the life of me, but the plastinator who made all of those figurines for the Clash films. When I was last in Scotland not last year, but the year before in Scotland, they had all of the original plasticine figurines from Clash and from all of his movies. I can't remember his name. Oh God, no! It'll come to Harry something. No, it eludes me. But oh my God, they had the actual ones there. Like they had the Kraken. He was like full size, and it was just like a bust of him, but it was so incredible to see in real life. And I was like, this is like purely my childhood. And actually, the remakes of this just do not do how scary Medusa was in that film justice. She was so scary.
So one of the topics that you have covered, and as you said, you have a friend there, is the Philippines.
Yes.
And there are so many weird creatures from there. And the one, and I'm.
Is it the Manananggal? Can I guess?
Yes. Yes. I listened to that. Yeah.
I must have mispronounced that about 4,000 times. And then I heard my friend say it, and I was like, I now need to go and correct this like a million times over.
Because I think your friend does the opening of that episode.
She does, yeah.
And she says it, and I had to play that on repeat because I'm like, what the heck did you just say?
Mm-hmm.
And so can you tell us, do you remember, can you tell us a little bit about what that creature is?
Yeah, so the Manananggal is, sorry, I speak really fast as well. It's it's loads of N's, loads of A's, loads of G's. So it's Manananggal, and it looks like it's a crazy word to look at. And I probably anglicized it in some way as well, I'm sure. But it's basically a woman who is kind of like a vampire, I suppose. And they break off in the nighttime, and they leave their hips and their legs behind, and then go and feed off of I think it's pregnant people. I can't remember if it's pregnant people or if it's just normal women, but they go and basically feast on people in the night, and then they come back to their body in the morning, reattach, and they're like, no big deal. And the way to kill them is to like dip their legs and their hips in vinegar, or to put them in I think it's bamboo, some like a sharp what's it called, like a sharp plant field, and basically when they come to land back on their body they get impaled. But it's the only way to do it is to kill them when they're like detached, which is pretty gross. But yeah, they're a wild monster, like really crazy. And yeah, they're all this typical monster called an aswang, which is basically the Filipino word for demon. And they just roam about eating people and sucking their blood, which is pretty gross. But yeah, it's a really interesting monster. Like, highly recommend looking into it. But basically, Dominique, my friend who helps me with all the Filipino monsters, I think it's her aunt's cousin or something like a really detached, familiar relation, believed that I think like the person's brother's wife was an aswang, and so in her family there was like this weird relation to demons, and I was like, this is insane. And we got to work together whilst I was doing my masters, and she wrote a play about she wrote a adaptation of Vida Cruz's story, Beneath the Mango Trees, which is all about a capra, who are these amazing like cigar smoking tree demons that are pretty chill, to be fair. And she rewrote that story whilst we were at uni, and I was like, this is what I need you for. And so when I started this, I was like, you need to help me with all this stuff, because it's just so good, and you'll be able to give me actual link backs to this. And actually I got to meet Vida through video calls to Manila, so actually it was an amazing experience. And actually being able to talk to her, who's like realistically a Filipino mythological storyteller, was just incredible.
I think that's the one that I'm on right now. I just finished the Capra.
Yeah, so. Capra's a very, very cool monster. Like, they're spooky, but they're like pretty, as I said, pretty chill. They're pretty chill. I like monsters that don't go around eating people, the ones that are just like, I just exist. It's cool.
Absolutely. All right, we got to take a quick station break here, and I have Stephanie and Ellie coming up here, and both of them are members of the Cryptids, Anomalies, and Paranormal team, as well as Stephanie is a host here on WLTK-DB, and I highly recommend both of them. So we'll check this out, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Certified psychic medium Stephanie Lynn creates an authentic connection between the living and the spirit world. Stephanie knows she is here to help heal, educate, and provide validation that there is more after death, and allows herself to be a conduit and work as a team with spirit to pass on messages from their world to ours. Stephanie Lynn also works as a spiritual life coach to help you achieve, create, and manifest your best self and life. Looking for help communicating with an animal? Searching for a past life regression therapist? Or dealing with a paranormal experience? Stephanie Lynn is here to help. For a list of full services, visit her on Facebook under Stephanie Lynn Spirit Sensitive. That's Stephanie Lynn Spirit Sensitive. Ellie Weisensell's psychic medium is a medical intuitive that specializes as a body code practitioner. As an energy healer, Ellie offers additional services that allow her modalities to be intertwined with energetic healing. Within your subconscious lies information that knows everything about you and why you deal with specific conditions. The subconscious can be considered the blueprint to your entire body. With Ellie working physically with your subconscious mind, we detect what negative emotions are trapped and where they are stored within the body that is causing you your emotional and physical pain. This work is designed to remove imbalances and correct them energetically, getting to the root cause of why you have your condition, to help balance your body so it may heal itself. Your body is infinitely wise and wants to be in balance. The body code is not only gentle for humans, but it is also a gentle process to help animals. For more information, contact Ellie Weisensell at the website below.
All right, we are back here on Monday Morning Monsters. My guest is Erin, the host of Myth Monsters podcast, and you can get that anywhere that you can find podcasts, and Twitter, and you have a Facebook and all kinds of stuff, right?
Oh, I feel like I've got every social media in the universe. Yes, literally anywhere.
You also have a new TikTok, I believe, as well.
Oh, yeah.
I remember I'm back in June for this stuff. So.
I jumped on the TikTok train because I thought it would be fun, and then the algorithm on TikTok is just insane, and you have to post like 2 a day in order to be seen in any shape, way, or form. So I was like, you know what? All I'm gonna do. It got to a point where I was like, I'm just gonna post the sound bites that I do of the podcast, and that's it. It's done. But hashtags your best friend is my only comment there.
Yes. Yeah, we have a TikTok as well for caps, and I don't use it. So I just posted one video a little while ago of an EVP we got on a paranormal thing, but that's about it. So go check that out. Everybody listening. But yeah, so if you guys have any questions for Erin on any of the creatures or mythology from around the world or anything, feel free to leave them on your platform of choice, and we'll pull them up here as we are heading into the second half of this show. So feel free to leave them, and any questions for anything that you have from creatures and myths around the world. So you have done all kinds of cryptids, myths, creatures, and stuff like that. So one of the things that we look for when we're doing these investigations and stuff is similarities. So obviously we know, like, Bigfoot, Yeti, Yaren, Orang Pendek, Yahoo, all of those can be very similar creatures and stuff. So have you noticed anything else that, I would argue the fact that the cadre that we were just, cadre, is that right?
Capra.
Okay. Capra. Thank you. I knew it wasn't right, but I couldn't get it. I would argue that sounds very similar to a Bigfoot.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think it could full on get away with being a Filipino ape man. 100%. I think the only difference is that he goes around smoking cigars, and I think if we saw Bigfoot doing that, I mean, that would be the best thing ever, right? Yeah. Could you imagine? We'd be like, he's fully integrated into society. He's just a bit of a hermit.
The next sighting we get is they were walking down the bike trail and Bigfoot comes out smoking a cigar.
Just eating a mango, sorted.
Yeah. Absolutely. So have you noticed any other creatures, like the chupacabra, the Mothman? Obviously the lake monsters is kind of a given, but I mean, you have Nessie style creatures all over the world, but any of these other weirder creatures, have you noticed any similarities?
You know what? So I've just finished recording this week's episode because I had COVID last week, which really sucked, by the way. It really sucked. And it's a Korean monster. Forgive my pronunciation because it is quite a difficult word. Imyongo, something like that. I have practiced, but I've forgotten in the 2 hours I've been away from it. And it's basically a if anyone saw the Winter Olympics in 2018, it was like their mascot, and it was like a giant. It's basically a giant goose, but with a human face. So it's very much a hybrid creature. It's quite disturbing to look at, but they're very peaceful and serene, and it's all very nice. And of course, you can look at that and go, well, that's very similar to the harpy. It's a hybrid bird woman, and it's, you know, there's that nice little change there in its nature, I suppose, in the sense that one's really peaceful and one's really aggressive. And of course, you can also put together sirens and harpies, and be like, oh well, traditionally sirens were birds. They weren't this mermaid-esque type thing that the media really wants us to get on board with. They just weren't. So we can kind of put those two together in a box. Also, I think, of course, we have all of the different kind of witchy characters as well. So we've got something like Baba Yaga and Frau Perkta and stuff like that. All these like lovely witchy Slavic characters. And as well, we've got something even as basic as the Phoenix has a great Chinese equivalent, which is the Fen Huang. And it's literally exactly the same thing. And even the Bennu, which is an Egyptian bird, that could even kind of go into that same little category. So a lot of them, even though they're from completely different places in the world, can 100% go with each other. It's one of my favorite segments whenever I get to compare them in the podcast. I love coming together and being like, this is actually really similar to this one that we covered, just as a heads up. And yeah, I think some of them really do end up just being mimics of each other from across the world, with actually, you know, these ancient civilizations never had any contact with each other. So it's really odd how something like that can happen, but it just does. It's wild. And the Fen Huang and the Phoenix are the perfect example of that. You know, it's realistically a Greek monster from, you know, ages and ages ago, and the Fen Huang is from pretty much the same era, but they had absolutely nothing to do with each other culturally. It's so crazy.
So that's really interesting, because, you know, like, why is that? If these people, you know, we always talk about, like, you know, the natives over in Africa and the Mapinguari, not the Mapinguari, that's South America. Mokelia Membe.
Yes.
You know, you have
Nessie.
You have these huge dinosaur creature down in the Congo, and these researchers go down there. They show them pictures, and they say, "Is this what you saw? Is this what you saw?" And they say, "Nope, it's this. It's the dinosaur." You know, so when you're talking about these ancient civilizations, you know, and these myths and stuff of these creatures, these people are talking about something they've seen or something they believe in. So why do you think it is that you have these two creatures, you know, your phoenix birds of the two areas? Why are these two areas seeing the same thing and talking about the same thing when they don't know each other?
And Barnaby, I wish I could give you an answer, but we just don't know. It's one of those wild things that's just, it's so bizarre that they've managed to get pretty much exactly the same thing. And of course, you know, a phoenix represents so many different things. It's that rebirth, it's that resurrection, it's that starting anew. From the ashes comes everything else, as David Bowie very clearly put it. And it's, you know, it's so wild that they end up getting related, but it's just completely unfathomable, but no one really knows why or how it happened. It's almost like they had a weird psychic connection and were like, this is what it is. We have to make this bird.
Absolutely. So I was gonna say something. You have to, this is totally off topic, but I got stuck on comment over there I had to get rid of. But
did see it.
Yeah, I got rid of that. Blocked them. So you have to be a Jim Henson fan.
Oh, the Muppets were my life. Are my life to this Muppets Christmas Carol. I watched a good 8 times during the Christmas period. But I'm all about the Muppets. Wasn't a massive fan of Fraggle Rock. It just wasn't my time, but the Muppets were my thing.
Dark Crystal, Labyrinth, Mirror Mask.
Oh, don't talk to me about Labyrinth. I'm not quite. I'm still.
You triggered my brain. I have to keep one step ahead of you to ask the next question. You triggered my brain with David Bowie, and I went to Muppets, and then I got derailed in the comments over there, and we went with Jim Henson here. But
I'll love him forever, David. But David Bowie, I love him forever as well as Jim Henson. But holy moly, Labyrinth is just one of the best things I've ever seen in my life. And I still know to this day all of the words to Dance Magic Dance.
Absolutely awesome. I figured. I think you had brought up one of them on one of your podcasts too, but yeah. So, oh man, okay. So this is where I was going to go before all that happened. I haven't gone through all your episodes yet, so forgive me if you have covered this, but have you looked into any of the connections between Dogman and werewolf creatures and Anubis and like the Saint Christopher?
I did werewolves for my Halloween special this year. So I tend to do a big episode on these like massive creatures. But I think I briefly talked about Dogman. But I don't think I talked about the St. Christopher bit. But it was very much, as you've said and you've noted, and I'm so glad you've noted the layout because I'm very stringent about it. It's very much that description, origin, cultural significance, all of that kind of stuff, and I try my best to get the comparisons in where I can, but werewolves are such a massive topic. They're so big, and as well I think there's this I think with something like werewolves and dogmen, it's like mediafied so much in the sense that actually like the ideas that we have from like Van Helsing and the Underworld series, right, where it's like, oh, silver bullets and they transform every moon and they like rip their skin off and all of that stuff. It's like actually some of this is just complete bull. It's come from absolutely nowhere, and we've just kind of gone, yeah, let's put this in a movie and then see if it catches on. And I think now like people's perspective of those kind of monsters, of like vampires, werewolves, dogmen, all of these kind of things where it's like a transformation, has just been completely, well, literally transformed from the very basic stuff that has come from the lore around it and then just movie madness.
Yeah, there's, like you said, there's so much to deal with the Dogman stuff and the werewolves, because you have the whole lycanthropy thing of the changing, and there is not too many reports of when people see these dogmen, that they see them transform. Linda Godfrey, I don't know if you've read any of her books.
I know of her. I don't think I've read any.
Okay. She was the one that coined the term the Beast of Bray Road, and she was like one of the foremost authors on the Dogman stuff and that. She just passed away this past December. But she was from right here in Wisconsin, where I'm from too as well.
Amazing.
But she only had like a couple reports of them transforming. And I think one was from out in California. One of them was in a church where this person like transformed into this big werewolf creature. But otherwise, all the other reports of dogmen and stuff have been just, I saw this thing cross the road, stood up, walked across, was walking on its hind legs, etc. But then you have so many different types of these transformations, because even in the lore of, the native tribes and stuff, you have the skinwalkers that can transform. You have the ones that use a belt that is used for transformation. You have the ones that use a pelt, like the actual skin that they put on and transform. You have the ones that are werewolves bitten or whatever and can transform. And then even the types of them, you have the Anubis style creatures with the head of a dog and the body of a human, or you have the full werewolf style bodies. And then you have these ones that look like hyenas. Yeah.
Or they can transform into a wolf. Like an actual, just a dog. And it's like, oh, great, I'm a wolf now. It's the variations are just mad. Like, and the funny thing is that it goes from ridiculous to ridiculous, in the sense that it's like, oh well, you know, the belt and the pelt thing, they kind of make sense. It's a very Herculean kind of thing. You can kind of picture it in like this old-timey fashioned way, and actually like proper old movie style. I can imagine someone like being like, oh yeah, I'm Conan, and putting the the belt on, and then it's like, oh, it's a virus now. And it's like, oh, that's boring. Like, I'm done with that kind of adaptation. I mean, we're all done with viruses, I'm sure, but it's like, I'm done with that adaptation. It's cool. I would much prefer if we all went back to believing you just put on a belt and that was it. You're a werewolf now. And you can choose whether to like transform or not. Like, that's awesome. And then we've got like stuff like Twilight, where it's like, I'm just gonna like transform just in the general area. I'm gonna turn into this giant mega wolf. Yeah, I think that I don't want to see the Twilight things anymore. I want to see the belts, and I want to see the native idea of putting that pelt on and like slowly kind of morphing into it is the coolest idea. Why aren't we doing that anymore? Like, blows my mind.
There are so many other ones, you know, besides just the native stuff. Well, I guess it's still native, but you've also covered things like the Selkies.
Yes. Yeah, and they're amazing. The seal skin. Yeah, and they are, I mean, they're so sad. It's such a sad myth. Like, the sense that you know, they come to shore to kind of get away from it all, I suppose. The drama of the ocean.
Yeah.
I guess. And, you know, coming to shore, taking that skin off, and like knowing that that's your like one thing that you have to cling on to. And again, like a lot of the times it's like female monsters as well that we see. And it's all that idea of Selkies are very much an idea of violation and taking men very much taking possession of women in that way. And that's it's so sad in that sense, this myth. But I mean, thankfully, I think a lot of the time in these myths, they end up getting their skins back at the very end, but they still get, you know, they get held captive like 40 years, and like they have kids with these people and stuff like that. And it's like this weird, it's almost like a Stockholm syndrome kind of scenario where they're full on, you know, their whole identity is taken from them, and then eventually they find it by accident, and it's and then it's that whole, oh, I'm just gonna abandon my family that I've had and go back to being a floppy seal. So I think intrinsically the Selkie story is so sad, but that transforming aspect is so common within mythical monsters, especially like, I mean, we've got stuff like the hybrid monsters that are naturally there. I mean, Gorgons are a perfect example of that, this transformation to a permanent state. But yeah, it's stuff like the werewolves and the Selkies and stuff like that, where it's like, oh, I'm choosing, or maybe I'm forced to by a natural way to kind of be this monster. I think is, you know, it's that sense of lack of control, isn't it, that's quite scary.
So in all of your creatures, I know you talked about this on your show a little bit, but what do you feel actually could exist? Like if there was, you know, a couple creatures and stuff that you think.
Well, you've listened to it, and you'll hear me say, you know, do I think they existed? And most of the time, immediately, it's no.
Yes.
So, oh gosh, you know what? As much as I love the Popelic monster, I think he's a fantastic, and I think this is the thing. I'm like, all of these are great. I think they're all fantastic, and they're fantastic ideas and stuff. But like, realistically, would we have found this by now? And I think that's like the allure with something like Bigfoot is very much like, oh, 100%, I do not know. I think that is full on, I have no idea. Yetis are exactly the same. I'm like, I don't know. I also don't live in the areas where I can find one, but I have no idea. And I think it's completely plausible that something like that could exist. But a lot of the time, the monsters that I cover tend to be just a little bit too much. Like basilisks, for example. We could argue that basilisks exist. They're basilisk lizards, or anacondas, or something along those lines. I mean, I think there's a South American one called a Yakamama, which is basically an anaconda. That's all it is. And I'm like, yeah, it makes sense that this could exist because we know that exists within our current society. An anaconda is a real thing. But yeah, I think I kind of struggle when they get a little bit too far-fetched. I'm like, this just can't. I'm so sorry. I'd love to say that they do, but it's just not gonna happen, I'm afraid. And even something like I did one on gargoyles not too long ago. And I loved the old show and was like obsessed with The Hunchback of Notre Dame as a kid. I was like, as much as like I want to go to a church and believe that at night they turn out to be really helpful, nice New York guys. You know, they're just not. It's just not a thing. But they physically exist, like absolutely. But they have a purpose outside of that. So I do want to say yes more, but a lot of the time I just can't. But I do think a lot of the time as well, there's like a very reasonable explanation to some of them. So like the jackalope is a great example of that, where they have this wild rabbits can get this horrendous fungus that grows out their heads. It makes legit sense. If I saw that, 200 years ago, I would be like, that's a monster. I don't understand what a fungus is other than the mushroom I eat. And I don't understand that's a fungus because it's 200 years ago. And I think something like that you can kind of explain away. But yeah, a lot of them just can't be.
Well, I always tell people, they talk about like all these creatures and stuff that couldn't exist or can't exist. Well, look at the stuff that we know exists. Like the platypus, like a lot of the underwater creatures,
Yeah.
The chameleons, octopuses. There's so much weird with those creatures,
Yes.
and we know that these animals exist. We've studied them. We know that they can change color, that, the octopus can fit into really tiny spaces. They're super intelligent. Platypus is a mammal with a duck's beak, and it's poisonous. It can lay eggs. It has all these weird things about it that shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And yet they exist.
And I absolutely agree with you. Platypuses are weird. And I never ever rule out. So for me, the one thing I never rule out is ocean ones. I have no idea. We have no idea. Like, it's the same to say, do you think aliens exist? I don't know, because we've discovered what? 2% of space. It's ridiculous. And the ocean is exactly the same. We've discovered 5% of the ocean's waters. We know nothing about what's down there. Like something like that we know existed, the megalodon, for example. There are still reports that it might still be out there. But there are also reports saying, well, that it couldn't physically live because there's not enough food, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, actually, we have no idea because it's just all the unknown. And I think even stuff like in Appalachia, half of that, I imagine half of that hasn't even been touched because it's like, it's the middle of this giant mountainous forest. It makes complete sense that there's no idea of knowing what's there because we just physically can't get to it. And until we get to a point where we can do that as a race, it's just, we can't rule it out. Like the Kraken, I'm fully behind the Kraken being a real thing. Fully behind it. It scares the living daylights out of me, but I'm fully behind it.
Just stay off of pirate ships. You'll be fine.
Oh, honestly, just stay out the sea. I think that's honestly, I think that's the best advice I've ever had. Someone just say, just don't go in it. It's fine. And I'm like, you know what? My life is so much better without being in the sea.
So again, I haven't listened to all your episodes. Have you covered any of the stuff as far as like more of the cryptid animals that did exist, like the thylacine, the Tasmanian tiger, more of the pterosaur creatures, like the coelacanth? Have you gone into any of that stuff?
Not as of yet, but I am planning to as of this year. So this year I'm doing a whole load of more like what's the word? Elusive mythologies and beasts. So I've tried to kind of stick to what people know for the last few years, just so I can, in the most markety term possible, get more listeners and like interest people. And once people are interested, then it's like, oh, then I'll listen to the weirder ones that I don't know anything about. so this year I'm trying to get into more mythologies that I've not touched before and ones that I've never heard of. And yeah, I've got the Wampus Cat at some point coming up. I covered the Jackalope was last year, but that one is like a little bit more obvious. I've got Bigfoot this year, which is that's my big Halloween special this year. Just as a pre if anyone wants to listen, it's a special secret hint for what's coming this year. But yeah, I honestly I have this horrendous Excel spreadsheet of literally every monster I've ever discovered, and I'm so anal about organizing stuff and also making sure that everyone is represented. And I'm trying to put together lists of just monsters from everywhere and then categorizing them into countries and cultures so that I can at least like once a year I can touch on something, which is why like, sometimes I won't for a whole year, I won't touch something that's Inuit because there's just not enough content. I don't want to put all of them in 2 years and then be like, oh, I'm never touching this again, by the way. And it's the same with something like Egyptian monsters, which we wouldn't, if you think of the Egyptian mythology, it's massive. Like you can't go, oh, well, you've run out of Egyptian content. That's ridiculous. There are like 5 monsters in Egyptian mythology. There's just nothing for me to cover. So it's like, for example, this year, I haven't factored them in. I just can't. It would be silly for me to do so. So it's very much, trying to figure out which ones haven't been touched enough about. And I think definitely for those kind of Pokemon inspiring definitely Pokemon inspiring monsters, I'm definitely trying to get more in this year at least.
It's definitely, like you said, all over the place. I mean, you cover everything from even religious, some like biblical stuff, the Egyptians, Australia, and all over the world. You have stuff, and that's one of the reasons why I still listen to it and working through it, because there's things out there that, my thing is like we talked about earlier, trying to figure out the things that are connected. So if there's, we all know the different types of Bigfoots all over the world, and there's other things like the Mothman. There are so many other creatures that match. If you take away the names and you look at the definition of what these things supposedly look like, there are so many creatures that match Mothman. And people are like, oh, there was just one in Point Pleasant. Well, no, there wasn't. There was all over the world, these creatures. Like the Ahul is very Mothman. The not La Lenora, there's the woman down in Mexico.
La Llorona?
That is it? The one that turns into the owl.
Oh no, gosh, what's that one? Oh God. You're gonna.
Yeah,
well, I'm terrible at that.
She's out there too, and we're professionals. Don't worry,
we really are. No, and that's it. And for me, like, I'm very much the same. I love that comparison, but I'm also a massive video game. I absolutely love video games. They are my lifeblood, and I love finding new games that I can interact with those monsters in. So, like. A really weird one that comes up all the time is Scribblenauts, which is like a kid's game. And it's like you draw stuff to help you solve puzzles. And there's like you can summon like these crazy monsters. Like Ahul is one of them. Like you can just like type that in and they'll generate like a little owl boy. And you're like, how did this happen? This is crazy. And it's picking up on those. I love picking up on those little books and like media, and actually being able to be like, oh, I've watched this, and actually I completely missed this. I didn't notice it at all. I love that stuff, and I think that for me is like, I want to continue to absorb that content. Even if, this podcast is over in 15 minutes, I still want to go and find more werewolf content that maybe I haven't heard of before and stuff like that. Like my mum showed me this horrible werewolf film from, I think it's the 80s, and I can't remember what it's called. And he like melts his face off to transform. I can't remember what it's called. It's a horrible, horrible transformation scene. It gave me nightmares. It was that bad. And she was like, yeah, this like gave me nightmares like back in the day. And that was something I hadn't seen before. And I was like, how, werewolf content is all over the place, but this is something that I haven't seen. And this is great. Like, I love being able to talk about this with people like you. And it's like, I've seen this ridiculous movie from the 80s that I didn't know about, and it scared the daylights out of me.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much stuff to cover, and I think we've done a pretty good justice on covering, because there's so much. Every culture around the world has seen these things, and they've reported them, they've written about them in myths, mythology, cryptids, and if you look at them as a whole, why are people seeing the same thing all over the world?
Yeah. It's
I,
crazy. It really is. Without social media as well. Isn't that wild? Like without the internet intervention at all. And I think, with more modern cryptids, 100% that can play into it. The internet can totally feed stuff.
Mhm.
I mean, look at the Slenderman case in the sense of we had a video game, we had a whole bunch of lore around it, we had what they call creepypastas, and then that turned into a couple of girls stabbing their friend over it and it becoming like an international thing. And it's like, actually, something like that, which is pretty dangerous. It's like, oh, you kind of see the development with the internet with that. I mean, something like even creepypastas have managed their way into cryptozoology and stuff like that. Something like the Rake, for
Mhm.
example. Slenderman is a perfect example of that kind of integration into modern cryptids and mythology. And maybe in 100 years they'll be talking about those as myth monsters. Who knows? That's the thing. It's mental. Because who can say that you haven't seen Slenderman in a forest? Maybe you have.
Absolutely. And
I
that
hope
that
not.
you you bring up a really good point there, with Slenderman. I want to talk about that really quick here. Is, it was a creepypasta, as you said. It was 100% fake, written, brought up. But then, I don't know, have you ever done an episode on tulpas?
No, not yet.
Okay. Well, tulpas are like this thought form, right? So if enough people read about Slenderman, believe in Slenderman, and bring it, into the forefront of your brain or whatever, there's this possibility that if there's a tulpa, you can thought form this creature into existence.
Oh, I hate
So
that.
it's possible. You're welcome. More
I hate that
nightmare
so
fuel for
much.
you. But it's possible for this. And now I'll tell you one other anecdote here that for people that ask me, do you believe in all this stuff? And I say, I'll believe in anything because I cannot tell you that I've seen some weird stuff. I've had Bigfoot encounters, I've had paranormal encounters and stuff, and I cannot tell you that you didn't see a fairy in the woods, that you
Yeah.
didn't see Slender Man, because I know what I've seen, and I wasn't there with yours. And I tell people that I believe in everything except leprechauns.
Go
Have
on.
have you have you done a leprechaun show?
It's another one that's coming up this year.
Okay, all right. So I haven't heard, like I said, I haven't listened to all your episodes, but so I wasn't sure if I missed a
This is so
leprechaun.
wild. I'm so excited to see where this goes. As someone who is redheaded, Irish descent, I'm like this.
So I believe in everything except leprechauns, because apparently there's no, now you're gonna have to come back and tell me on this when you do your show. There's no lore or legend about leprechauns. The
Oh.
leprechaun was created by Walt Disney.
Oh, that's interesting.
It was one of his earlier one of his earlier cartoons that he actually created the character of a leprechaun, and it spawned this whole legend, lore, mythology off of that. Now, I haven't done the research into it to validate that, but
I can't say that I have either, so
okay. Well,
let's
we'll
get
both look
into this
forward to
part
that.
of it.
So now here's the thing, though. I don't believe in leprechauns because there's no such thing as a leprechaun. But going back to our last conversation with the tulpas, if enough people believe in it and manifest it, now there can be leprechauns. So
I mean,
just because it doesn't have the mythology and the lore of having existed, it can have been brought into existence, and now there could be leprechauns out there.
that's I don't like that. I've got to be honest. I don't like that because the amount of stuff I imagine, I just don't. I've just finished. I binged Love, Death, and Robots because I
Okay.
thought it wasn't like you've listened to my show. I talk about how much of a wuss I am all the time.
Yeah.
I don't do horror. Just for
Yes.
everyone, I don't do scary stuff. Nothing. And it's I watched that thinking it was not a horror, and it wasn't, probably. But it was scary enough to frighten me. I went to bed one night after watching season 3, and I was like laid there like, and was just, and like, for example, like for me, Slender Man was like a big thing when I was growing up. It just come out, and obviously creepypastas were going around on, you know, stuff like the actual creepypasta site didn't exist. It was very much like albino black sheep and all that stuff, and you're getting chain mails about girls in Japanese sewers. And there was one about it was like these kids who one of them got skinned in a closet or something, and she like carved her name into a closet or something. Oh my god, it screwed me up for weeks and weeks. And I was like, if I can, and that's it. It's like I didn't go near a wardrobe in that time. I was like, no, thank you, I'm good. And it's the same with Slenderman. And I get like kids now, I imagine, are very much. I mean, kids now are probably over that and think it's way too old. But you know, I'd be freaked
Ancient
out
mythology.
if yeah, exactly. They're like, oh, you know, this is well old. But yeah, I think going to that, I wouldn't, if I just read the Slenderman thing and then played the game as well, because the game is scary. I 100% it would be on my mind all the time. I 100% would think that would be a summoning problem. And I mean, the natives are very into that in the sense that, you know, Wendigos and Skinwalkers, even saying them, you know, we're wishing them on ourselves, which is, you know, touch wood, very bad luck. You know, it's that idea that, you know, you summon them to you by talking about it, and that freaks me out in a sense. Even something like Bloody Mary, I will not do. I won't do it. No, no.
That show as well. You did an episode on that as well, didn't you?
I did.
And
yeah.
there was I actually did one of our first episodes for Caps was urban legends and stuff like that. And I tried the Bloody Mary thing, and you had different variants than what I had found.
Oh,
as to how to do it and do that, because you did cover the one that I did where the woman walks down the stairs with the candle and stuff like that, and I did that. But you had another whole version of the origin of Bloody Mary in the first part of your episode, and I was like, well, that's not what I had. And then you came around to mine, and I'm like, oh, okay. So yeah, it's just so interesting having, you know, from two different sides of the world and researching and just the stuff that you've learned in that as far as, you know, where things come from.
Yeah, and like I mean, the European history going into that one is just mental. I mean, we had a queen literally called Bloody Mary, and you know, and then we had Elizabeth Bathory in Hungary. I was going to say down the road in Hungary, you know, down the road.
Great aunt.
Yeah. But you know, we have those that feed into that myth. But I mean, I grew up knowing that, you know, you would not. It was and it's all about prepubescence, and you know, especially like women coming into age and stuff like that, and menstruation, all of that kind of stuff. And actually, to be able to link that back to a queen and also, you know, a serial killer is so interesting. And it, like, you just wouldn't put those two things together other than, you know, oh well, Bloody Mary the Queen and the mirror counterpart have the same name. Like, you know, if you look a bit deeper into that, it's like, oh, you know, this is linked to, you know, adolescence and coming into stuff as a woman, and these two horrible figures in history. Like, it's crazy. And this, you know, a postcard, realistically, it's just mad. So that was possibly one of my favorite episodes. And actually, one of my friends who she's obsessed with doing things in chronological order. She was listening to all of my episodes and she binges them. And she got to Bloody Mary and was like, Erin, I can't do it. I'm so sorry. I physically cannot listen to this episode. It freaks me out so much. And when I recorded it, I was freaked out. Afterwards, I was like, I said that way too many times. Yeah, and she texted me, and this was like a year and a half ago. And she texted me the other day and was like, I still haven't listened to it. I've had to get over my fear of chronological order. And I've just ignored the episode and carried on. So, and I was like, I get it. I get it.
Well, from my point of view, I can honestly tell you that having messed up my, my speech that I was trying to record, my intro for that, and I had paranormal equipment all laid out on the dresser with the mirror and the vanity and everything and candles, and I did the whole 9 yards, and I did it way more times than should have been possible, and none of my equipment went off. I didn't see nothing, so I think you're probably safe there. So.
Oh, thank goodness. No, honestly, I've been so scared of it. I was like, no, I'm not even going to try. I'm good. There are some things I don't need to know, and that's one of them.
Awesome. Well, you have been absolutely amazing as a guest today. I appreciate your time, and hopefully I can have you back on and we can talk more. Maybe bring on some new cryptids and stuff, and we'll work out a list of stuff to talk about. And
yeah, I would absolutely love to. Thank you so much for
Awesome.
having me. It's been such a pleasure talking to you and everyone listening. It's a joy.
Thank you. Yeah, we have a great show from Pete Ober.
Thank you, Pete.
I don't know your name. He's another host on WLTK here. And another one, hi, and interesting show. So very good. And Robert, who's a member of my team, says that there's a Legends and Lore of Little People in Wisconsin when we were talking about the leprechaun stuff.
The leprechauns.
Yeah, there's absolutely. I mean, we have you done puck wedgies yet?
Not yet. Again, they're on the list.
Awesome. Just throwing them out there, you know.
Oh, I know. Honestly, don't. For the US, there are just so many to cover. It's like, I mean, it's a smorgasbord full of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Same with, I mean, the Greeks and the Brits are exactly the same. It's like you can just pick out, and everyone knows them as well. So they're a joy to cover, and they're a joy to research. I tell you that. This one that I covered today, the Korean one, it was like pulling teeth trying to find content on it. So it's very much when I find something like, you know, especially cryptids, when you find that stuff, it's like, oh, this is a gold mine.
Absolutely. I cannot highly recommend your show enough. It is very good for anybody that wants to get into a certain cryptid or myth or anything. They are just what you need. There's not too much information that you get bored, and there's enough information. I mean, you know, obviously we know we both talk really fast, and you cram a lot into that little time. There's been a couple times I've have to rewind your episode and be like, all right, hang on, I missed something there. Somebody talked to me at work or something. I have to get back to it. But there's so much information on all the things that you cover. And we haven't even scratched the surface of all the stuff that you got going on, and highly recommend everyone go listen to her show, Myth Monsters podcast, wherever you get podcasts, and give it a review, like it, love it. And then come back and I will hook up with Erin here and try and get you back on later on, and you guys can ask her all of your myth monster questions.
Yes, please.
Erin, where can we find you? Where can people send you questions, comments, anything?
Questions, comments. I'm most contactable on Twitter because it's easy, although I begrudge using it currently. Instagram's the same. So Twitter, I go under Myth Monsters Pod. Everything else is Myth Monsters Podcast. And I have a site as well where you can leave comments, and I actually leave all the references to my show in the sense of everything, TV, films, all of the cultural stuff, the modern media, I put into a reference page. So if you're interested in looking at these monsters or any monsters that you really fancy and I've covered, I've put them on that site. And that's mythmonsters.co.uk, because of course, English. Yeah, but Twitter is, I know. But yeah, Twitter is the way to get me under Myth Monsters Pod. And yeah, honestly, ping me a message, whatever. I'd be more than happy to speak to you.
Awesome. Sounds good. Go check out the show. So many things. And hopefully I'd love to have you back on again and talk more. And
same. This has been a joy.
Well, thank you very much.
That sounded well sarky. It wasn't sarky. I actually had so much fun. It's been a joy, actually. Yeah. No, it's been so good. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, guys, that is our show for this week. Thank you so much for your time and joining us. And go check out Myth Monsters Podcast. Until next time, I'm your host, Barnaby, and I'll see you out there.
The truth is here and now on WLTK-DB Talk Radio at WLTK-DB.com.